this episode of ArtsAbly in Conversation. My name is Diane Collin. I am a woman with short hair, blue eyes and glasses, and today I wear a gray top. Behind me is a dance studio with gray walls, tall mirrors, and spotlights. This series presents artists, academics, and project leaders who dedicate their time and energy to a better accessibility for people with disabilities in the arts. You can find more of these conversations on our website, artsably.com, which is spelled ArtsAbly.com. Today, ArtsAbly is in conversation with Lisa Sniderman, a musical theater playwright, a songwriter, a ukulele player, and a vocalist known by her artist name Aoede, living in California. You can find the resources mentioned by Lisa Sniderman during this episode on ArtsAbly's website in the blog section.
Hey everybody, check this out. What makes a live theater experience? I'm driven to find ways to take the spectacle of live theater, the visuals, the audio, and especially the feel of being in community with a live audience, and to create comparable, immersive, engaging experiences for a virtual audience. I'm Lisa Sniderman. I'm the playwright and co-composer for The Grieving Project. For 16 years, I've lived with rare chronic illness, and I kept so busy creating, I realized I had forgotten to grieve my illness. And I've also been home for years, missing and unable to attend live theater. And I had this vision of bringing live theater experience to those like me in community with others through hybrid stage performances, which sparked the Grieving Project.
My name is Suzanne Richard, the theatrical director of the Grieving Project. I wanted people to be able to go to the theater, and if they couldn't go to the theater, to be there watching a show in community with others.
My name is Jessica Wallach, and I am the accessibility director of the Grieving Project. We want people to have multiple access points to experience this show.
My name is Christopher Morrison. I'm the digital experience director for the Grieving Project. In order to bring in the show into the metaverse space, we brought in a 3-camera team and a live stream team. Inside that metaverse space, there are 3 hanging screens over our digital twin of the theater. We also had a digital twin of the lobby of the theater where our digital audience could meet in avatar form, talk with each other, obviously get some instructions about how the space would work.
Hi, my name is Yana Chan. I am video director, a live video director. Grieving Project. It very much became about really allowing for the audience to choose whatever moment they want to see, just like you're actually in live play.
I was independent, and I was strong. I had passions and songs, and was free to follow dreams. I didn't even give it thought.
One word that encapsulates how this made you feel or what it made you think. Cool, curious, engaging, interesting, introspective, challenging.
For those of us who can't go see big shows like Water for Elephants and The Outsiders and Hell's Kitchen, it's important that we too have engaging, immersive theater experiences beyond Broadway on demand. And this proof of concept is only the beginning.
Welcome to this new episode of ArtsAbly in Conversation. Today, I am with Lisa Sniderman, who is a musical theater playwright, a songwriter, a ukulele player, and a vocalist known by her artist name Aoede, living in California. Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you. It's so great to be here.
Thank you for being with us today. It's great to talk with you. I know you have a lot of projects going on, a lot of talents that you developed over the years. So I am very interested in knowing a little bit more about you. And as a first question, can you talk about your background, your story, and also provide a visual description? Thanks.
Yes, so I'm Lise. I'm a white woman with long red, brown, curly hair, wearing blue glasses. Today I have a flower fascinator in my hair and a black and white polka dot dress with the pink scarf. And I go by she, her, and I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area, California.
Okay, thank you. So how did it start, all that? How did you come to music and arts?
Well, I have been living with a rare chronic illness for 16 and a half years, two actually. Dermatomyositis, which is a progressive muscle weakness disease that affects my muscles, skin, stamina, energy, and something called common variable immune deficiency. And that impacts my immune system and that means I make few antibodies. And I've been homebound even before the pandemic due to compromised immunity. So let's take us back, as you said, years before all of this happened, so that you kind of get a sense of that's where I am now. This is where I kind of started. So I started making music in about 2006 under my artist persona, Aoede. And I chose this name because she was the muse of song in Greek mythology. And I actually wanted to be affiliated with inspiration, just to remind myself to be inspired and to continually inspire others. And it actually I focused on albums and folk pop rock initially in a singer-songwriter genre. And then in 2010, I actually had a big health flare. So I was diagnosed in 2008 with the first of my muscle diseases. And in 10, I had a big flare that hospitalized me. I was unable to use my muscles. And so I had to relearn how to do everything, basic functions, sit, play, stand, and relearn my instruments. And so that was a big transition in my life. And I shifted my focus in 2012 to musical theater, knowing that it was not really, in the cards for me anymore to be doing my singer-songwriter dream. I wasn't going to be able to tour. I couldn't do live performances. So I had to shift and figure out, how do I keep my dreams alive? And so at that point, I started creating young adult fantasy musicals as audiobooks. And I blended character voices and narration and full musical scores. So think of a radio play. And I started putting those out in 2012. And at the time, I had released, over time, I've released about 10 albums, including 3 of these fantasy musical audiobooks that I had put onto, that I'd recorded. And then I adapted some of those to stage plays. So basically, I had this health setback that prevented me from fully staging my work. And that was a big thing because I was really getting the musical theater bug, but I wasn't able to move forward. So the main thing is I created art, and I realized this only recently, kind of to escape from my illness. And then I started making music and theater to help others struggling with chronic illness thrive. And I started integrating my illness into my art. And I discovered that music and art are my lifelines, and I just can't stop creating.
And I think when COVID hit, it opened this possibility of connecting everywhere in the world that then became the normal, and did it influence your thoughts? And okay, let's continue that and open it to the world. There is no reason why we couldn't make it this part of this a project where everybody could connect from everywhere.
Yeah, so in my world, that leads to what I'm doing artistically, or what I ended up doing, is because I had spent so much time basically creating that I realized I hadn't grieved my illness for all of these years. I just sort of, and a lot of us do this. We put ourselves directly into our work and we just keep going. Sometimes it's a society thing that tells us, be strong, don't let your outside, show what's going on the inside. And so I never really grieved. And that was a big thing. So it sparked me to create this project that I can talk about. But when you talk about COVID, it all happened during the pandemic. So it was a time where not only was I looking at like, oh, all of these things that I may not have grieved with my illness and changed identity, but here we have a pandemic. So now we have loss on top of it that we were all feeling, that was also brought to that project, including how it was created, right? Just the fact that we had to be in different places. I couldn't be physically at the studio. My health doesn't allow that, right? So my producer was at the studio. So the pandemic helped shape the projects that I did during those years, for sure.
And I think it also opened so much possibilities to other artists just to imagine, okay, I'm an artist creating from my bed, but
Yes.
now I can create from a theater with a computer, with someone helping me put a computer there. And I saw so many artists like having new ideas and also gaining confidence on the fact that there was a possibility that a kind of new possibility that was opening.
Absolutely. And for some of us living with illness and disabilities, that wasn't new. The whole, like, I'm not saying the ability to connect with theater. You'll see that the project I'm talking about is exactly that, bringing live theater experience to people who can't attend, like me. However, but first, even Zoom, that was something for some people. I'd been on Zoom for years. That had been my main way of connecting. And I gave workshops, on things that I was doing to chronic illness communities. So I was already in that realm. In other words, the isolation factor wasn't as big for me for the pandemic as it was for some, because I had already been operating that way. And a lot of us that I had talked to who had been living with illness and not so much out in the world were sort of guidance to other people when it happened, because we've been there, we've been isolated.
Yeah, it's really, it reminds me of the talks we can have in disability studies, in critical disability studies, where really the medical model of disability, framing everything around whatever a condition is, blocks the humanity and the social parts of the person.
Absolutely. We are not, I always feel this, I am not my disease. I have a disease. And it does shape part of my identity, as does disability. I understand that about myself, but I'm first and foremost an artist, right? I am not saying, hey, I am dermatomyositis. That is not me, right? So that's exactly what I mean by, I think we're on the same page about that I'm not the medical model either.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So speaking of medical model, you did a very interesting project which was it's a video where you explain your experience in this progression of the disease, and it's an animated video. Can you talk about this project?
Keep Shining, if that's the one you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so this was a spark for the project that I'm going to be telling you about, called the Grieving Project. And the reason that it is such a spark for me is, I think, as I was saying, I denied, or I avoided really thinking about what happened to me back when I was in the hospital. Well, that happened in 2010. It was 2019 when I was creating Keep Shining. And I had interviewed a whole bunch of people for a project called Lights in the Darkness. I thought, like, I had written a book. I wanted to share my memoir. It's called A Light in the Darkness, Transcending Chronic Illness Through the Power of Art and Attitude. And when I thought to myself, what's the best way that I want to share this with the world? It was in collaboration with other artists. So I looked all over the world to find people who are also creating to heal, and did this Lights in the Darkness. I created a song that was based on all of our experiences called Keep Shining. And it wasn't until I created the video for it that I realized this is my story. And as it was unfolding, that, oh my gosh, the storyboard is the hospital. Oh my gosh, the storyboard is recovery, etc. That was the first symbol to me. I hadn't grieved my illness. And a nurse, when I was getting infusions at the time, saw this video and said, your video can help others, access their feelings in a way that words alone can't. And that sparked me to create the Grieving Project as a spoken word musical audiobook.
So can you talk about this project, the Grieving Project?
Absolutely. So not only did I describe that I've been home due to health, but I've also been able to not attend live theater. And I envision bringing the spectacle of live theater to others. And whether that's the audio, the visuals, the feeling of being in community with others, all of that sparked this vision to adapt an audiobook that I created during the pandemic to a hybrid stage musical. So I don't want to spend a ton of time on the audiobook, but I'll just say during the pandemic, that was my, source and inspiration. Was like, I basically put together 14 tracks, and they all revolved around grieving and thriving. So 7 related to the stages of grief and 7 related to these stages that I created of thriving, because I didn't want to stop at acceptance. That doesn't go far enough in my eyes. So anyways, I created this. I've started adapting it. And my dream is to stage this, but I can't physically be part of it. So, right, we ask ourselves, what do you do if you can't realize your dream in person? So this was what came to me about this idea of the Grieving Project. When I started adapting it, this goal is to reimagine theater and bring experiences to people who can't attend live shows. And we did this with a hybrid disability-centered musical that blends live and virtual theater. And basically, think about if I describe what we did as a proof of concept, which I'll describe in a little bit, it's like you're able to experience it. If you can go in person, you can see it in a theater live. If you can't, like me, you go into a virtual computer-generated space, right? Think of it like that. And we meet, Diane, we sit and we meet as avatars in a lobby, and we can talk and we can, see things around us. And then we can go into the theater and watch the show together. So it's a community experience. It's an opportunity to engage and bring this idea of spectacle to others. And in the story, it's set pre-pandemic, where there's 4 disabled artists that compete on a reality show called Disabled's Got Talent. And as the story progresses, we explore themes of illness and mental health and identity and transformation through the lens of this reality show. And the 14 stages of grieving and thriving that I was mentioning mirror the competition rounds. So Lisa is this playwright and a game developer with a progressive muscle weakness who dreams of launching this musical carnival game called Wonder Haven. And when the pandemic hits, it halts the contest, and the characters are sort of forced to decide, do they want to continue this contest? And so they end up in Wonder Haven in some fashion, right? This world that Lisa's created. And the key question that it's asking is, how can we let the light in and keep our dreams alive? And that is what I'm also exploring as a alternate title, is how the light gets in. So that's another thing that I'm, playing with. And I'll just say really quickly, like to sum up this project, we secured $65,000 to produce a proof of concept in Baltimore, working with Open Circle Theater. So they're a disability-led theater in the DC metro area. And we were able to, do this proof of concept. And we also, this will evolve into a full hybrid production through 27, we're thinking. Musicals take a long time to get to stage. And the exciting thing is we were selected for a Doris Duke Performing Arts Technology Lab R&D grant. And that means that we are exploring the tech and the accessibility elements for the project over the next 5 months. So it's important to me, right? We'll talk about accessibility specifically and why that's so important to me personally, but this is also, not just about the concept. Like, it's so easy to talk to people and go, wow, look at this cool, virtual lobby that you've created. But I also want to root the story in, centering disability, authentic, making sure that it's sort of like an emotionally driven story, and not just an interesting concept. And then the last thing I'll say is it's developing a model for radically accessible hybrid theater. That's the intent of this. So it's fun to be pioneering this new concept.
It's really, really interesting, because working on music specifically and trying to work with people who can find solutions of playing differently, like playing, learning, teaching children to see music education in another way and to integrate ASL, but also to play with these instruments, the virtual instruments that could allow to play without touch, or that could allow, but we are so far from what the technology in theater can offer. And so it must be fun to think of the new generation of theater where artificial intelligence or IT could be included. And then we are in a whole universe. So that's what you're doing with your team.
That's what we're striving to do. I will say, I feel like we have a little ways to go with accessibility, particularly. Here's an example. When we did our proof of concept, we got a firsthand look at, okay, most people will log into a website in order to create an avatar, and then they get into a space that is now the virtual theater. It's just a website. It's not, a whole new app. However, if you are low vision or blind, you may need a screen reader. Well, how much of this is keyboard based versus mouse? How much, right? What can the screen reader read and do? How efficient? How can you navigate these areas? And that's just one example, right? And then within the platform itself, are there ways that we can use, not saying haptics, but all kinds of different tools for immersive, like there's so many great things happening, and we get an opportunity to work with XR Access, which is a consortium out of Cornell, to be a consultant on this. And I'm really excited by that because they work with disability specifically with XR and mixed reality and AR, all these terms, right, that are in relation to the VR world without necessarily having to have like VR glasses on. So there's a lot, like you say, it's opening up in an interesting way but I'll also say, so one of the most exciting things for me was my participation was by robot. Okay, so I'm reimagining access in different ways than just traditional. When we think of, the physical access, obviously we think of digital access, right? We'll talk about what accessibility means, but for me, that also is expanding it because I couldn't be there. Now people like me, as a behind the scenes, so to speak, right, as a playwright or a designer, can participate. And I did that for our whole production for 2 weeks by robot, right? And that means I was able to control the robot from home. I'm able to navigate in the space differently than just, say, relegated to a Zoom square in the corner.
It's amazing.
It's amazing. Yeah.
And it's a good segue to this question: what does accessibility in the arts mean for you?
Yeah, so in general, I believe that it means everybody, regardless of ability, can create and experience and enjoy art fully and without barriers, right? So when we talked about I was sharing a little bit, I think my work is more on the digital right now side and the inclusive side, making sure people with disabilities are part of design, etc. But, access extends to physical, sensory, and cognitive and programmatic, like all these areas. In my work, I feel like my advocacy has been around, I've been a passionate artist, and I've worked extensively as an advocate in the chronic illness communities since 2018. So my take is like, I'm ensuring that people with chronic illness can have access to arts in different ways. I have brought, when I launched, like I say, A Light in the Darkness that I was talking about, I collaborated with 50 artists and I produced live multimedia events. I hosted an online summit in June of 2020 called How to Thrive with Chronic Illness that had 1,800 participants after a year of videoing interviews with experts that I recorded from home and many from bed. So this is all stuff that I'm doing as somebody living with chronic illness to help others in my community thrive, right? And then I've also engaged with disabled communities over the Grieving Project as the audiobook. So I have a support group that is part of my own illness community called Myositis Support and Understanding, where I ran workshops. And so I've been able to work with theater company for a virtual reading where I cast disabled actors I've, worked with Open Circle Theater on accessibility-driven virtual workshops, and even my work in Ramped. So Ramped is recording artists and music professionals with disabilities. Diane knows because she's a professional member of Ramped too. So I was secretary and engagement co-chair, and even before that, I was working on partnerships to help make the Grammys more accessible. So a lot of my work actually is around access in different ways than I would have ever thought that access is actually happening, right? And then directly in my project, in the Grieving Project, it is disability-led, created for, by, with people with disabilities, rooted in accessibility. And so we hired an accessibility director. We had a director of artistic sign language. We had like the basic, when I would say basics, like assistive devices if people need it, et cetera. But then beyond that, as I was saying, we were trying to figure out how do we really include, everyone from the top of this project, like from, building in access rather than thinking about access as an afterthought. That's the key for our project is we say, hey, access extends to all aspects of the project and all people, including me. We're not thinking just our audiences.
And what has been fabulous in this initiative to work with the Grammys is that they were responding. They were actually listening, which is rare for big organizations that are like, oh no, we have to accessibilize our thing again. No, not at all. They were like, okay, these people are awesome. Let's listen to them.
Yes, but Diana, and I'll yes and that. And accessibility is good for everyone. And that is something that we're starting to really, that message is coming across. I've heard it touted many times of curb cuts, that initially it might have been for wheelchairs, but people who have babies in strollers, moms with babies in strollers, use them, right? Like, so that it's not just, so in other words, if we create accessible experiences, then we're doing it for more. Like in my project, my priority, my focus is people with chronic illness and disabilities. And yet I know that it's going to speak to economic, it's going to speak to geography, people who can't get to theater for that, for people who have problems with physical access at theaters, right? So there's different communities that we're going to be able to serve. And of course, since it's online, we're talking worldwide now, right? So this is exciting to me. And I'm not saying we're the first at all to be creating hybrid theater by any means, but I don't see a lot of hybrid theater creating full musicals in a metaverse style, right? Like a virtual environment. And I also don't see it that's rooted in disability. So that's what I feel like we, our advantage or whatever we call it, right? That we can bring to the table.
Absolutely. Well, this is fantastic. Congratulations, because it's really huge. And even if it's just a proof of concept right now, everything you've accomplished so far with this team, it's great.
Thank you.
I have a last question for you, and it's about people who might have impacted you in your career or inspired you. If you had to think of one or two people who really counted in the progression of your career, who would it be and why?
Yeah, honestly, right now, because I wasn't necessarily thinking of the past so much, is the present, and that is Lachi. So Ramped has at its helm the definition of a rock star, in my opinion. She's the founder of Ramped. She was the past president for the times that I served alongside her for a while, and I've served alongside her while she was president. And so I've gotten to know her monthly, right? Like through monthly meetings, et cetera, as well as, different ways. Watching her lead and grow Ramped while skyrocketing her own career has been very motivating and empowering. And she gives all of us a platform to rise and shine. And she shines her light brightly in everything she does. She's this exceptional leader, and she's this staunch, tireless advocate and uber talented artist. And she promotes disability advocacy work while excelling in her own career. To me, it's like she elevates disability culture, fights for authentic representation, and promotes identity pride. So I have had this excellent role model and shows me kind of, let's put it this way. When I first was sort of on the fence about how I personally felt as a disabled artist, I was still using differently abled. I was still using terms like that because I had a community who thought that dis meant different, separate in a negative way, not necessarily in a way that was like, hey, we should celebrate this. This is part of us. We're cool. We bring, problem solving in all these different ways because, not despite. I always think of that, right? That's maybe, I don't know if I got that from Lachi, but that feeling for me is because, not despite. And so that, she's bold and unapologetic, and she makes disability visibility a priority. So it doesn't matter whether she's performing at the performing or speaking to somebody at the White House or on a call with ramped members, like everywhere that I've been able to experience what she brings has been very empowering. And if you use the word inspiration with her, she might shoot you. So I will just say, she always says, and this is fascinating, it's interesting to me because I have affiliated myself with inspiration, muse, right? I'm the one who's supposed to inspire in my head as my artist persona. And that extended into my life, which made it hard to grieve in some ways because I'm always supposed to be the positive one, right? And not be, okay, so for her, inspiration, we had a conversation once that it's about, what do I inspire you to do? To act. And so that's where she wants to be affiliated with inspiration in some fashion. But a lot of people in the disability world have this whole thing about disability porn, meaning just because somebody gets out of bed and gets to the store, don't mean that's inspiring. That's just what they do, right? Like, and I'm saying it, facetiously because it's true. Even my director has shared an experience about her pumping gas while in a wheelchair, and that being something that somebody else had to comment on as very inspiring. Now, I know that some of these people are well-intentioned. They are not meaning harm to Susie in this case. They just don't know. Yeah. And so I don't know. We could have a conversation for like 40 more minutes on this.
Yeah, for sure. But speaking of conversation, it comes with the conversation. It comes with the communication. It comes with, I'm a wheelchair user, so I have that a lot. And people come to me and say, "Oh, you're so inspiring." That's the way people have been taught to see disability, right? So now how to change the narrative, how to change the education, and how to change the non-intentional behavior, it's by speaking with people. And I constantly have that.
Yes, I can imagine. And and that for me, I'm okay with being inspirational, not because I'm disabled, but because something I'm doing is giving somebody an impact of some sort. And Lachi does that for me. So yes, she does motivate me sometimes to act. And that's what she's about. Like, that's where the inspiration comes in. So yes, if somebody says, wow, you're really inspirational, that's okay for my artist identity. It may not be okay for my disability identity, but it's okay for me personally. That's just where I'm at.
And I'm sure you're going to be a role model for someone who's listening or seeing your work. So yeah, that's great. Well, thank you so much. It was great talking about all your fascinating projects, and really best of luck for everything.
Thank you for having me. And I just love what you're doing. I'm so glad that you're here to share, uplift, promote artists. It's a great, opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and talk soon in another project. Have a great day.